So adaptations can also be used to explain the basis of a number of things like values and in the form of phobias, right? And general human values, as well as ones that are more specific to various cultures, right? Um, what we might call preferences or prejudices in Gadamerian terms, but in biological terms, we would call them preferences. So many preferences have a biological source, right? Such as phobias. Right? Consider a group of that moves from one region to another. Now, in their initial region, there were no spiders, right? Or maybe a couple of species completely harmless, non venomous, non aggressive, live and let live sort of deal. But in the environment that they move to, this group now has moved to an environment where there are many species of venomous spider, right? And aggressive ones at that, that live and don't know any better than to prey on, or that live in the area. And since humans haven't been around this area, they don't have like an understanding that maybe that humans are predator animals, other than the size suggests that they're a danger to the spiders. Right? So a lot of people get bit by these venomous spiders. Let's just assume it's like black widows or brown recluses, something like that. Well, okay, many members of the group die from spiders in the beginning, and this makes the remaining members wary. So over time, the remaining members come to understand that it's better to avoid spiders, uh, and they teach this to their children. Right. So it's a matter of the psychological conditioning from watching a lot of their tribe members die, and it becomes a cultural thing in as much as like the tribe or whatever passes this information on in the beginning. It's like avoid these creatures; they are dangerous, right? Um, and this contributes to survival, right? Over time, this becomes such a thing amongst the individual members of the society that in order to better fit the environment, rather than waste space thinking and teaching this constantly, it becomes ingrained in the genetics. Right? This is why you have people who have phobias for things that they've never encountered. Right? There's plenty of people who are deathly afraid of spiders or snakes. Things like heights, that's a pretty common fear, because if you're high up, well, if you fall, you're more likely to hurt yourself, right? Um, so there are people who have like minor degrees of um, agoraphobia, right? So fear of open spaces outside, because that makes you an easy target, right? Uh, so if you have a particular phobia, like a genuine irrational fear that's not based off of your own experience, then in all likelihood, it's because it was more or less bred into your genetics by your ancestors, right? Where the fear was based off of reliable information, uh, or information that was reliably acted upon, right? It was to their benefit to have that ingrained, that sort of knowledge ingrained in them. So they adapted over time, so it wasn't something that had to be taught uh, culturally, right? It was a survival strategy. Biology adapted to instill the fear as a mode of precaution. Because one thing that is very important, biologically speaking, is reliability, especially on the evolutionary level. We value things, all animals, all species value things that are useful. Right? So if there's a particular hunting ground or whatnot, that tends to be fresh, ripe with, prey animals for a group of wolves, then then the group of wolves will hunt at that location uh, during a time when they know there will be higher likelihood of, food. Uh, so things like migratory patterns, even for birds, and hunting patterns are based off of adaptation, reliability, knowledge that comes down from previous generations and sort of just got stuck and ingrained in a species to a certain extent, right? So when the reliability of resources changes, so too do the hunting patterns have to change. Do the animals have to adapt? And what we see here is that basic hermeneutic circle at work. You have the individual, right? And then up here, and the group or the species down here. You have the external pressure, in this case, like spider bite or change in a change in resources from the usual hunting grounds that causes a stimuli. Either the individual dies off or they adapt to better fit, and this benefits the group. Right, the group sees this and benefits from it. In the case of like the individual dying off, it's like that gives the group information, the surviving members. If enough of the individual members adapt, then the group as a whole winds up adapting, right? Or winds up changing and taking on this in response to the external pressure. So adaptations among species are, broadly speaking, of two types: partial and impartial. They admit of partiality and impartiality. Partial adaptations are going to be, partiality for an adaptation is going to be the preferring or adaptation of a group or some individuals, right? Basic valuing, we're going to say, on a biological level. For example, Arctic wolves, as a species of wolf, are going to have a preference towards lighter coats. That's why if you see, Arctic wolves, an Arctic wolf with a darker coat, they're usually either fully outcast or relegated to a lower ranking in the pack hierarchy, because, well, the species lives in a tundra environment, so they hunt in snow, and as a you know pursuit species, a stalk and pursuit species, that's how they hunt, right? They need to be able to blend in through their environment to get the best advantage on their prey as possible. And if one member of the pack stands out, that's going to threaten the ability of the pack as the whole to survive, right? If their own predator animals, or animals to which they are prey, the wolves are prey to, can spot the one member. And more to the point, if the animals that they prey upon can spot the wolf, the one member wolf, then that makes it harder for them to hunt. Right? So that's an example of partiality. Specific species or groups will wind up preferring specific things, right? Or subspecies will wind up preferring specific things due to the environment. An example of impartiality is going to be the omnivorous diet, right? Because impartiality is going to be the preferring of all individuals as a collective. Right? It doesn't matter if you're talking Arctic wolves, North American timber wolves, or the species of wolves that you find in Japan and Europe. Those are the only other two countries I know that, or places I know that have, yeah, because Europe's a country. Those are the only other two places I know that have wolves, right? The diet's going to be the same. It's going to be largely meat-based with some fiber and some, it's going to be omnivorous as a result. So based on this, we can see the origins of values, even human values, to a certain degree, in evolutionary processes, perspective. Right? Arctic wolves will ostracize a member of the pack born with a darker color fur because it's a threat to the pack. They value survival, they value reliability, and lighter coats are more reliable for hunting. All right.